It was 3:11 a.m. when a whisper slid under my bedroom door. "Do it clean," a man said. My husband's voice. A second voice, thin through a phone speaker, his mother. "She won't see it coming." I lay still and counted the quiet. The careful step over the one board that creaks. The den lamp flick on, then off. The bed easing, like a lie sliding into place. By breakfast, his phone flashed a calendar block. Jade launch, non-disclosure. For a second, I thought I'd read it wrong. Jade what? He slid the phone to silence so quickly, it almost looked like a magic trick. He used his shoulder to push open the pantry and came out with the jar of cinnamon sugar, all dumb grin and easy charm. "What's the vendor's name?" I tried, gentle as a hand on a dog's back. "Just a guy, you know." He sprinkled sugar like confetti and bit into the toast. "You're working the Northfield loft again today?" he asked. "Inventory check," she said. "Early afternoon. Rosa's dropping by to return the microphone from the PTA pageant. Tell her I said thanks. The reindeer antlers were a hit." He kissed the air just to the left of her cheek and headed for the garage. The door lifted. Cold stepped in like a polite guest. His car started. The bass of the radio thumped a little. He backed out, careful as always, the way he could be careful when he wanted to be. Evie stood there with a cooling cup of coffee and looked at the empty side of the island. She rubbed at a ring left by a glass and watched it fade, the rag catching the moisture, the wood a little lighter underneath. Jade Launch. It sounded like a craft beer or a spring shoe line, not a secret at 8 a.m. The strip mall on Main Street called to her the way it always did when something in her chest needed sorting. Dinah's Diner with the neon script, the Blue Olive with its euros and glossy olives, the nail place where the techs were saints about cuticles, and the Maple Springs Gazette office where the editor, Tom, was always fishing for good news to print between the bad. Dinah had coffee that could make a person forgive the first 30 years of her life. Evie slid into a corner booth with her laptop and an old sweater, ordered cinnamon sugar toast because sometimes nostalgia and carbs were the same thing, and turned on the little dinosaur of a printer she kept in her tote for on-the-go estate sale labels. A notification dinged. New email. Fulton Community Bank. Notice of appraisal. 421 Northfield Road. Her studio address. She clicked. A PDF bloomed open. The bank's letterhead sat on top like a teacher's name on a worksheet. The words were too polite to be anything but bad. Appraisal scheduled, owner consent on file. The attachment below was a scan of a consent form, signature curling neat and practiced. The problem was the signature was hers and it wasn't. The E in Evelyn looped the wrong way, like someone who had studied her handwriting had gotten lazy in the last inch of a test. Evie set the mug down and took 2 slow breaths. It could be a clerical error. It could be a wrong file. It could be a dozen things. But the loop in the E said it wasn't any of those things. She tapped her phone. Rosa McMillan answered on the second ring with a voice that always sounded like somebody's favorite aunt. "Hey, Evie, you need the mic early?" "Different question," Evie said. "Did you notarize a consent for my building?" "Absolutely not. Who forged me?" "I'm looking at a stamp with your name on it and my signature with an E that looks like it's trying to dance." "Oh, my Lord." "I'm headed to the recorder's office. I'll meet you there. I'll bring coffee, but not Dinah's. Their cups leak." The county recorder's office never pretended to be anything other than what it was. Fluorescent lights, half-worn carpet, stacks of forms that could put a person to sleep, a line of people holding birth records that would make grandpas cry, and a bulletin board where someone had thumbtacked a flyer for a lost tabby with one ear bent. The clerk behind the glass had a nameplate that said Ben Morales in Sharpie, because the county couldn't be bothered to order him something nicer. Rosa bustled in a wool coat and sneakers, cheeks bright from the wind. "Show me," she said, setting a coffee down like a baton in a relay. Evie slid the bank email across the counter. Ben took one glance and sucked air through his teeth. "I can pull yesterday's filings. Give me a second." The second stretched itself into a minute, then 5. Ben came back with a stack of copies and a look that said he wanted to apologize for paper itself. "There's an application to amend your LLC, adds a managing member, removes consent requirement for certain transactions, authorizes refinance for growth, filed late yesterday, and this," he slid another sheet, "a deed of trust request. The bank needs both owners' signatures." "I am both owners," Evie said. "I am all owners. I own it." Ben tapped the names. "This one says Jade Collins. And here," he pointed at the stamp, "is a notary named Rosa McMillan," which is cute because that's me and that is not my stamp. Ben's eyebrows knit. "We'll flag this. We'll tell the bank. And Miss Hart, you might want a lawyer." In Evie's mind, the puzzle pieces made a small, mean click. Jade, the calendar block that morning. Do it clean. She won't see it coming. January made sense now, like a map makes sense when you find north. She left the recorder's office with cold hands and a hot chest and drove to a squat building with frosted glass and a brass plaque out front, Cho and Linden, LLP. The framed article in the lobby showed Diane Cho smiling politely under a headline about big wins for small businesses. Diane was a tidy woman with sharp eyes and a habit of listening so hard it made a person feel like she was the only client in Ohio. "Start at the beginning," Diane said, setting a legal pad down, pen poised. Evie did. 3 a.m. whisper, the calendar block, the bank email, Rosa's notary stamp, the recorder's office. She slid over the folder with her deed in her maiden name, the operating agreement with the unanimous consent clause, the tax returns with the little green tabs, the insurance, the lease documents, 100 small proofs of a life she'd built when nobody thought she would. Diane's eyebrows lifted a 1/4 inch at unanimous consent. "Good," she said. "That's a wall. And this deed? Even better." She tapped the year, 2 years before Travis. "This isn't marital property. This is yours." Evie let out a breath that rustled the corner of the legal pad. "We'll file a fraud alert, notify the bank, put a hold at the recorder's office. We'll get a judge to sign a temporary restraining order to prevent any transfers or liens. And we'll put the chamber on notice that they are not to say a single word about any leadership changes at your company without your written permission." "The chamber breakfast is next Thursday," Evie said. "Perfect," Diane said. "I'll have the order by Monday. Bring 3 copies to the breakfast, keep 1, give 1 to the chamber director, hand 1 to any bank rep who shows up to eat pancakes. We'll be as quiet as possible until we've got paper. Don't confront anybody, not yet. We tighten the net before we shake it." Evie ran a thumb along the edge of the folder. Her hand stopped shaking somewhere between "we'll file a fraud alert" and "we'll be as quiet as possible." She could feel the careful way Diane laid down each plank of a bridge over a river she hadn't realized was there. "Evie," Diane said, voice softer, "you did the most important thing already." "What's that?" "You put your name on what you built." They sat in that for a second, the compliment warmed by the truth. At home, a pot roast sat in the slow cooker smelling like a Midwestern winter should smell when it needed you to forgive it for existing. Evie mashed potatoes in a glass bowl and kept her face open and ordinary. Travis came in from the garage trailing new cologne in a grin. He leaned in to kiss the air near her cheek again, like his lips were shy all of a sudden. "What's the new cologne?" she asked, genuinely curious. He glanced away like there was something interesting in the corner of the ceiling. "Gift from a client." "Nice," she said. They ate. He talked about the Browns' chances like he believed in God again. He talked about sales targets, the new guy under him who didn't know drywall from sheetrock, and how he was for sure going to be asked to lead a training in Cincinnati next month. She offered appropriate nods and mm-hms, and when he said, "You know the chamber breakfast next week? I've got a little surprise for everyone," she stirred the gravy and said, "Surprises at 8 a.m. are dangerous." And he laughed too loud and changed the subject. Late that night, her phone buzzed with a text. She glanced at the screen and felt her head tilt, the way a dog does when it hears a note it doesn't recognize. It was a text from Loretta to the group chat that Loretta accidentally used when she meant to text just Travis. She'd done it before, Thanksgiving 2019, when she wrote, "We will not be eating at Evie's. Her stuffing is mush." And Travis had responded with a panicked, "Mom, delete this." And then Loretta had typed, "How do I delete?" into the chat like a prayer. The text said, "Did you move the original contracts into the cedar box? Where's Evie's building deed? Don't forget the keys to the storage unit." 3 gray dots appeared. Then, disregard. She clicked the phone dark and lay back on the pillow. Her pulse drummed in her neck. She folded her hands over the top of the blanket, stared at the ceiling, and thought, noted. On Monday, the Franklin County Courthouse smelled like sanitizer and boiled coffee. Judge Hendricks wore readers low on her nose and had a way of signing things like she was not impressed by the fact that paper exists. She read Diane's filing, glanced at the copies of the forged notary stamp, and said, "Happens more than you'd think," as she signed the temporary restraining order with a pen that had a tiny gavel glued to the top. "We appreciate the court's time," Diane grinned sideways. Evie drove the order to Fulton Community Bank herself and watched the branch manager make a copy on a machine that wheezed like a smoker. She handed the chamber director the second copy. He pressed a hand to his tie like it was trying to climb off. "We won't announce anything at all," he said. "We won't announce breakfast. We won't announce January. I'm sorry, Evie." "It isn't your fault," she said. "You just invite people to pancakes." At Target, she picked up packing paper, a 3-pack of industrial tape, and mascara, because old habits kept a person tidy when everything else tried to come undone. In the candle aisle between Ohio Autumn and Citrus Grove, she nearly walked into Jade. "Evie!" Jade said, too bright, too breathy. She had a cream blazer draped just so and a lip color that had half the city of Columbus on backorder. "Hey," Evie said. Equally warm and flat, the way you can be both if you mean to. "How are you?" Jade asked. "Busy," Evie said. "An estate in Hilliard has a basement that wants to eat you alive." Jade tucked a strand of hair behind one ear. "I'm working on a rebrand concept for a staging company. More millennial. Fesher. You'll love it." Evie kept her smile in a small, neat shape. "I love anything honest," she said. "See you at the chamber breakfast," Jade said. Her cheeks were pink, eyes too shiny. "You always said I had an eye." "You do," Evie said. "Find a way to use it without borrowing anyone else's name." Jade blinked. "Right," she said, and pivoted toward the throw pillows with a swiftness that suggested flight. Evie put the mascara in the cart and drove to the studio. The 421 Northfield Road building was a squat little thing, cinder block and stubborn, with a glass door that did a little stutter when it shut, and windows that let winter light pour in like skim milk. Evie had painted one wall a green that felt like quiet money. The steel table in the middle was from a bakery that had closed 2 years ago. She'd driven to pick it up herself when the owner cried, packing sheet pans into boxes. On the shelves, Vosses, coffee table books, woven baskets, a whole language of things people use to tell stories about their homes. In the corner, a rack of throws weighted in sage, oatmeal, and charcoal, each tag tied with rough twine in a hand that had written more invoices than love notes. She brewed coffee in the little machine by the sink, then set the TRO copy in a folder labeled February. She wiped a fingerprint off the glass door and told herself what she always told herself when a job felt bigger than her. One shelf at a time,
one box labeled correctly, one lamp wrapped so the shade stayed clean, one purchase that paid for the next one without borrowing anyone else's piece. The morning of the chamber breakfast slouched in wearing gray. The VFW hall on Maple Street had put on its best. Rows of folding tables wore plastic cloths under centerpieces made of pine sprigs and battery-operated tea lights. Rotary banners hung crooked on a rope. The coffee had already burned for 20 minutes. Pancakes steamed under a metal cloche the size of a car hood. Realtors buzzed in blazers. Contractors had traded Carhartt stains for clean jeans and boots. Dinah's granddaughter flirted with the idea of cutting equal slices of sheet cake, and then remembered she was 17 and moved her attention to her phone. Evie wore a navy sheath dress that made her feel steady. Her mother's pearl studs sat against her ears like small yeses. She set her purse at a table near the front. Diane slid in next to her, legal pad tucked under a tote bag, hair clean and sharp. On Evie's other side, Rosa sat with a thermos and eyes that moved like a lifeguard's. Across the room, Travis stood by a poster board with a mock-up for something called Second Story 2.0 in a font Evie would never pick. Next to him, Jade smoothed the front of her blazer and held her shoulders like she knew gravity personally. Loretta hovered near the coffee urn, a rosary peeking out of her purse, fingers twitching like she was counting something other than prayers. Mr. Fulton from the bank had a raffle ticket strip stuck in his shirt pocket. The chamber president tapped the mic. "Good morning, Maple Springs," he yelled into the sound of forks and folding chairs. "We're grateful to the VFW for hosting us again, and to Fulton Community Bank for sponsoring breakfast, and to Dinah's for making pancakes like a sacrament." A polite laugh. He pushed his glasses up. "Local business keeps this town alive, especially the ones who make our homes shine." He gave a little wink toward the staging businesses. "We've got announcements, we've got coffee, and we've got a special message from Travis Hart of Second Story Staging." Travis took the mic like it had been calling his name. He rolled his shoulders once, the way he did before a tee shot when he imagined 3 men clapping. He smiled into the lights.
"Folks," he said, "I started helping Evie with Second Story a few years back as the business grew. It's been a journey." He paused like he expected applause for a journey that involved exactly 0 blisters on his own feet. But companies evolve. Leadership evolves. His eyes slid to Evie for a half second, then away, as if he couldn't hold the look and hold his nerve at the same time. "Today, I'm excited to announce a fresh new direction, Second Story 2.0, with Jade Collins stepping in as creative director." Jade did a modest wave. A ripple moved through the room like wind through field grass. People turned their heads. A realtor half lifted her phone. Rosa's thermos stopped midair. Loretta's mouth tilted into a smile she'd bring to a funeral. "And," Travis said, his voice dropping into the solemn register men use at church potlucks when they're about to say something unkind in a respectable way, "on a personal note, Evie and I are choosing different paths. It's amicable. Life's chapters, you know. She'll be moving out of the loft next week, and I'll steward the business forward. We appreciate your support." Silence. A fork ticked against a plate. A baby made a noise like a hinge. The chamber president's eyebrows slowly climbed his forehead like he had 2 caterpillars for pets. It was a mean thing to write a scene and cast other people in it, then act surprised when the audience didn't clap. Diane's fingers touched Evie's elbow, quick and light, like a cue in a play they'd rehearsed once in a dream. "Go." Evie stood. She did it without fuss, like a person standing up to stretch her legs. The chamber president handed her the mic as if it were too warm to hold, and he was grateful to be rid of it. Her hands were steady. She smiled the small smile a person reserves for sharing a joke with the universe. "Thank you," she said. "I'm grateful we're all here. I love this town. I love these realtors who can walk into a split level and convince it is beautiful. I love these contractors who show up when a widow needs a basement cleared. I love Dinah's coffee and the fact that the VFW hall puts on a good show even when the snow won't mind its own business." She looked at Travis, then at Jade, then at Loretta, and finally back at the room. "And I love facts. There was a laugh. It loosened shoulders, took a notch out of the panic. People leaned in like good students, suddenly sure they might learn something practical before the bell rang. Fact 1, Evie said, lifting a manila envelope. The building at 421 Northfield Road. I bought it before I knew Travis existed. She held up a certified copy of the deed, the notary's seal catching the light. It's deeded in my maiden name. Any refinance requires my signature. I did not give it. The Gazette's photographer took pictures like weather. Clicks filled the space between breath. Fact 2, she said, raising another paper. Last week, someone filed to amend my LLC to add a managing member and authorize a refinance. The notary stamp is a bad copy of Rosa McMillan's. She gestured to Rosa. Rosa lifted a hand. Her face was the precise temperature of a Presbyterian handshake. She did not notarize it. We have a temporary restraining order in place. Diane, elegant as a magician's assistant, lifted her tote just enough to slide copies onto the front table. The chamber president stared at the paper like it was a snake and a Bible in the same package. Fact 3, Evie said, and let her voice go softer instead of louder. It was more dangerous that way. Our operating agreement requires unanimous consent for any leadership change. There was no consent, so there is no change. She let that sit. It was a chair at a table a lot of women never get to sit at. She pulled it out for herself and sat, unhurried. Jade's red lips thinned into a line. Loretta's rosary beads moved faster in her purse. Mr. Fulton from the bank looked down at his raffle tickets, then up at Travis, then down again, then up again, as if the numbers might rearrange into a different man. Evie let go of the envelope and looked at the room the way a person looks at a backyard after the storm has finished knocking down branches. The damage was clear, the cleanup would be tedious, but the house was still there. And now a personal note, she said. When a man announces your replacement at breakfast, you learn something about him. She breathed once. You also learn something about yourself. I'm not moving out of my loft. I'm not handing over what I built. And I am not going to be angry in public. She smiled. Not when I brought receipts. The laugh was bigger. Relief, mostly. The kind of laugh a community makes when the story they were being told tries to take a turn and someone who knows the topography better puts a hand on the wheel. Diane stepped up, a second voice, clear and simple. For vendors and realtors, you'll receive an email this afternoon. Please use the second story staging email and booking link you already have. If you receive any other invoices or rebranded contracts, forward them to my office. The chamber president took the stack of orders from Diane like sacrament. Mr. Fulton cleared his throat. Mrs. Hart, Mr. Fulton said, pitching his voice into the microphone from the floor as if he had done this 100 times, we've paused all activity on 421 Northfield and flagged all related accounts. Mr. Hart, you'll need to come in. He looked at Travis without looking at him at all. With counsel. The room made that noise rooms make when the polite thing has now been said in public, and we are all supposed to pretend we didn't come to watch it happen.
Evie put the mic back in its clip. She picked up her purse. She had a living room to stage in Hilliard at 10. She had sage green throws to lay across a sectional and matte black hardware to install on a kitchen built when people still believed cherry cabinets were an investment. On her way out, the elementary school principal touched her sleeve. We're hosting a financial literacy night for moms next month, the principal said. Would you speak? 10 minutes on protecting what you build? Evie felt something low and clean move through her, like a river washing grid lines away. She said yes, gladly. Outside, the January sun made a thin effort at softness. The snow didn't buy it. Diane walked out with her, heels clicking the way "I mean business" sounds on linoleum. You did that with dignity, Diane said. I did it with practice, Evie said. I've been practicing dignity since I was 12. At 10, in Hilliard, Evie adjusted the angle of a lamp by 2 inches and watched a room suddenly become itself. It's a small thing turning a shade so the seam faces the wall. People think it's just about pretty objects, throws, vases, candles that smell like someone else's vacation. But staging is a sermon about hope. It's telling a room to say, you belong here, to someone who hasn't walked in yet. In the weeks after the chamber breakfast, consequences showed up late and stayed long. Fulton Community Bank called the forgery an internal matter, and then did an audit that made 3 men sweat through dress shirts.
The prosecutor, who had a mother who once cried in a bank parking lot with a fake signature drawing on a page, filed a charge related to falsifying a notary seal. Travis met with a lawyer who charged him by the hour to explain why his mother's advice did not outrank the Ohio Revised Code. Loretta left 3 voicemails and a voice she used for funerals and wallpaper selections. "Evie, dear, I only wanted to help. We don't need to involve authorities. Couldn't we make Jade a junior partner for optics?" Evie listened to all 3 and deleted them. She was done setting a table for a person who brought a fork and a list of demands. Jade sent a long text that contained the words misunderstanding, vision, and my truth, and ended with, "I'm sorry if you felt." Evie stared at the screen for a moment that lasted a whole season, then typed, "May you use your talent without borrowing anyone else's name." She blocked the number and breathed in once big and out twice slow. Travis lost his job the way men like him do, quietly. The company cited reputational distraction, which is corporate for, "You tried to set your wife on fire in public and the smoke got into the break room." He applied for 3 jobs and got 3 versions of, "We went another direction." Loretta made meatloaf and prayers that returned to her like old mail. In a better world, that would have been enough to turn a person into something new. In this world, it only made him sullen and sure that the story he tried to tell at breakfast had some other audience waiting to applaud on a different day. Evie didn't stand in any of the doorways where these men rehearsed their lines. She had work. She had a calendar full of penciled rectangles. The best revenge is not revenge at all. It's a schedule. On a Thursday, she signed the consent decree that matured the temporary order into something permanent and walked out of the courthouse with the kind of smile a person makes when she knows nobody can take her first name off a bank account ever again. On the way home, she picked up a Greek salad from the Blue Olive and ate it at the steel table with Dinah's granddaughter, who stopped by once a week with a pink bakery box and a level of tact that would get her through college. On a rainy Saturday, Evie taught 6 women in the elementary cafeteria how to file a fictitious business name statement, why to open a business checking account, and how to tell a cousin to stop borrowing the pressure washer. The fluorescent lights buzzed. The kids chased each other between folding chairs. She told the truth like it was a recipe. You don't have to be mean to be firm. You don't have to be loud to be heard. Put your name on what you build. Keep receipts. Dignity is a strategy, not a mood. When she finished, a mom with a toddler on her hip leaned against the table and said, "Watching you do that thing at the chamber, it made me call my credit union." Evie nodded and handed her a copy of a checklist she'd made on her laptop with boxes so satisfying to check, a person might actually do the things written next to them. "Good," she said. "Start with a separate bank account. Everything else gets easier after that." At the studio, spring crept in quietly. The windows fogged less, the sage throw looked less like a winter sweater, and more like a picnic blanket for a cold day at the park. The orders kept coming. Evie hired a second crew. She taught them how to tuck in the corner of a bed so it looked slept in but not rumpled, loved but not messy, like the way a life should look when it's honest. In April, she unlocked the studio at 6:47 a.m. and breathed in the smell of lemon oil and clean paint. Dinah herself shuffled in with a pink pastry box and set it on the table. "Cinnamon rolls," she said, "for the woman who remembered her own name." Evie laughed. "For the woman who saved mine every time she poured coffee." They ate warm pastry over stainless steel and talked about the high school's production of Oklahoma, the way the principal's new bangs were a bold choice, and how the diner was going to add avocado toast to the young ones. The town did what towns do when they're small enough to hold, but big enough to hide in if you need to. It kept moving. A week after that, Evie stood at her loft window and watched the sun drop behind the strip mall. The Blue Olive sign blinked twice and steadied. The Gazette's front window reflected a sky that wasn't sure about itself. Somewhere down the block, a teenager's bass rattled a license plate. That night, she texted Diane a picture of the studio's new sign, second-story staging, Est 2012, still here. Diane replied with the heart, and then, title for your talk next month? Evie typed, devotion is not a deed, then love is not leverage. She made tea and wrote 3 bullet points on a sticky note and stuck it on the edge of the laptop where she put all the reminders that outlived their own usefulness and still needed her attention. Put your name on what you build, keep calm, keep receipts. Dignity is a strategy, not a mood. On a Tuesday evening in May, a woman from the PTA walked into the studio with a flyer about a silent auction and said, "We're doing baskets. Want to donate a staging session?" Evie thought about how many rooms she could coax into looking like a promise. "I'll do 2, she said, "one for a widow." "Evie," the woman said, eyes going soft around the edge, "you're something." "No," Evie said, "I just learned to stop apologizing for standing upright." Sometimes the town forgot about the chamber breakfast. Memory is a muscle. It doesn't always choose the smartest exercises. But then the video would pop up on someone's feed. Evie's steady voice, the way she said facts like a blessing, the line about receipts, and someone would message her on Facebook. "You helped my sister." Or, "I left my husband's name off our LLC and slept for the first time in months." Or, "My cousin is mad you won, which makes me like you more." Once in Kroger, 2 aisles over from the Ritz crackers, Evie ran into Jade. No cream blazer this time, a gray hoodie, hair in a messy bun, eyes that looked like she'd seen her shadow and didn't like how long it was. "Hey," Jade said, voice small. "Hey," Evie said back. There was a pause a person could have climbed into and lived in for a long while. Jade said she got a job, designing for a furniture store in town. They like my mood boards. "That's good," Evie said. "Make something honest." Jade nodded. I will." They stood there with cereal boxes staring at them like billboards for childhood. Jade said, "You were right about using my own name." Evie kept her voice even. "It's the only one you can keep." Travis faded into the kind of notoriety that makes people stop talking when you walk into a room. He drove for a rideshare company for a while. He posted 3 times about cancel culture and then deleted the post when a cousin commented, "Buddy, that ain't what happened." Loretto moved to a smaller place closer to her church and away from the bank. She made peace with the idea that the story she wanted to tell about her son was going to have to go in a drawer next to the rosary and the recipes nobody else liked. On a Sunday afternoon, Evie visited her father in the retirement home on the edge of town. The hall smelled faintly of lemon and something she could never name. They played cribbage. He looked at her over the pegs and said, "Your mother would be proud." "She would be nosy," Evie said. She'd have called Loretta and told her where to go. "That too," he said. "Never met a woman more efficient." They laughed the kind of laugh grief leaves you when it's done taking the big things and starts leaving you little ones to unwrap like candy. Driving back, Evie turned on the radio. Bonnie Raitt came on, the one about not being able to make someone love you. Evie let herself cry once at the stoplight near the old Baskin-Robbins. The light turned green the way they all do. She wiped her face on her sleeve and merged into traffic. She didn't want revenge. She wanted balance. She wanted rooms to look like themselves, numbers to add up, paper to hold, names to stay where they had been put. She wanted the girls who grew up in Maple Springs to know that love was nice and stability was kinder, and that both were possible, but neither should come with someone else's hand on their throat. June put its hand on the town's head and smoothed down the flyaways. The farmer's market came back with radishes and early strawberries and a man selling honey who always flirted with the grandmas. Evie took a folding table to the market one Saturday and set out before and after photos, like postcards from a place Hope had been. A woman in a denim jacket stopped and said, "My sister is leaving a bad marriage. Could you do her house for listing?" "Of course," Evie said. "We'll make it light. We'll make it honest. We'll make it look like a fresh start without pretending it's easy." "You're good at this," the woman said. "I've had practice," Evie said. At the end of the market, Evie folded the table and stacked the signs and watched 2 teenage girls take selfies in front of the flower truck. The girls' laughter ricocheted off the brick like birds. Evie thought of herself at 17, making a face at her own hair in the mirror, and wished she could press one palm to that girl's cheek and tell her, "You get to be a woman who doesn't have to ask anyone's permission to keep the lights on." Some nights, she still woke at 3:11 and listened to the house. Old houses talk. They shift. They sigh. They answer questions you don't remember asking. When it happened, she would get up, pad to the kitchen, drink water from a heavy glass, and stand at the window. The strip mall across the way would be dark, but for the red eye of the ATM. The diner's neon would be off, but the sign, to anyone who knew the curve of it, would still spell home. She would tell herself the story truthfully. There was a night someone whispered a plan to erase her. The whisper sounded like authority, like a thing that deserved respect. It didn't. It was just a mouth making shapes. She survived it because she wrote her name in ink on her own life. She survived it because she called a lawyer on a Thursday like she was ordering a sandwich and did not apologize for cost or time or need. She survived it because she believed facts like a religion. She survived it because women in small towns keep one another's receipts. She survived it because she decided to. One tall, clean afternoon, a letter arrived from the chamber. They were giving her a plaque. She laughed the way a person laughs when the universe insists on giving out prizes for the bare minimum of a person refusing to be robbed. She put the plaque in the back room on a shelf next to a box of old curtain tiebacks and a ball of twine that had held together every moving day of her 30s. She kept the letter pinned to the corkboard because the letter felt like a neighbor dropping by with a casserole. The plaque felt like paperwork. On the first Tuesday of September, the studio door clicked open at 9. A woman stepped in, mid-50s, hair in a neat bob, hands that looked like they had been gentle with babies and plants, and husbands who, on good days, deserved it. "I watched your video," the woman said, without hello. "The Brexist." Evie nodded. "It made me leave," the woman said. "I mean it. It made me pack a bag the next day. I took the casserole dish too. He can fight me for it." Evie smiled. "Good," she said. "What do you need?" "A room that doesn't remind me of him," the woman said. "And a shelf where I can put the books I stopped saying out loud that I liked because he called them fluff." "We can do that. Bring the books." The woman nodded and swallowed and let her shoulders come down half an inch as if a bird had finally settled into a nest it had been building in midair for years. Evie wrote an estimate with a pen that had someone else's bank name on it because pens roam and names stay. She sent a crew to the woman's house the following week and texted her a picture of a room the color of early morning. The woman sent back 3 crying emojis and then, "I can breathe." Evie climbed into her Outback and sat with the engine off for a minute and looked at the way light made dust do ballet. She wasn't fixing the world. She was moving a lamp 2 inches to the left and letting a person see her own face clearly for the first time in a decade. When the first snow came again, the studio windows patterned themselves with lace. Evie pulled her sweater sleeves over her hands and answered 2 emails and then another, and then one more, and thought about everything she'd learned since the whisper came under the bedroom door almost a year before. She thought about Loretta's rosary. She thought about bank letterhead and the way fraud looks very official when it tries to be. She thought about Jade's pink cheeks and the way youth forgives itself with almost no help. She thought about Diane's pen, steady as law. She thought about Rosa's thermos, steady as friendship. She thought about Mr. Fulton's raffle tickets and how embarrassment is a door some men never walk through. She thought about Travis and wished him a small kindness, a day where he did not feel the need to invent a world where he was the center of gravity. He wished him just enough grace to keep him from becoming a monster and just enough consequence to keep him from ever trying this again with another woman who hadn't written her name down yet. That night, she wrote a list for the talk that she had been asked to give again at the school cafeteria, this time with dinner provided by the PTA. Spaghetti in foil pans and garlic bread that left your fingers shiny. The flyer had a picture of her at the chamber breakfast someone had taken and texted to someone else, and the caption read, "Protecting what you build." She didn't love the photo. She wasn't performing. She was just standing there with papers and a small smile. But maybe that was the point. You don't need a better dress to tell the truth. You need paper and a voice you can hear over your own heartbeat. She wrote, "Start with one account in your name. Trust the feeling that says, this doesn't sound like love. Calm is not weakness. Sometimes it is the weapon. Ask for help, then take it. Don't let anyone talk you out of your first name.
She taped the list to the inside of the cabinet where she kept vases, because she knew on the day of the talk she'd forget where she put it, and this way the vases would remind her. She poured tea and stood at the window and watched Maple Springs hold itself together. In the distance, the VFW flag lifted and fell. A boy cut across the parking lot on a bike too small for his legs. Dinah's neon sign signed itself off for the night. Evie reached up and touched the spot under her left collarbone where her mother had once put a finger when Evie was 9 and had lied about something small and stupid, chewing gum in church probably, and said, "You know what's right. It lives right here." She pressed her finger to the same spot now and told herself out loud in a kitchen that had learned her voice well, "You know what's right. It lives right here." She didn't want the town to tell this story about her forever. She wanted her rooms to be the way people said her name. But for now, this would do. This would be enough. On New Year's Eve, the studio closed early. She drove to the retirement home with sparkling cider in paper cups and found her father half asleep in front of a bowl game. He woke fast, happy to see her, happy to have the cider, happy to be alive enough to complain about his hip. "Resolutions?" he asked. "Keep receipts," she said. He laughed, then winced and laughed again. "You're something," he said. "No," she said. "I just remember what's mine." That night, she stood in her loft and watched fireworks from 3 towns over lavender the horizon. She poured 1 glass of the cider for herself and 1 for the room because it felt right to cheers a space that had held her like a promise kept. She thought about the women who would sit in folding chairs in the cafeteria next week, about the way fluorescent lights make everyone look like they need more sleep, about the relief on a face when someone says, "You are allowed to keep your money. You are allowed to keep your name. You are allowed to keep your work and your peace and your dignity and your kitchen and your vases and the way your dog looks at you when you walk in the door." She raised the glass to every woman who ever thought she had to choose between being loved and being safe. You don't. She drank. The room held. The town hummed. The new year stepped into the doorway and waited politely for her to finish what she was doing. In the morning, the email inbox was full, not with orders, though there were a few, not with bank notices, though once upon a time those had been the shape of a threat, full of notes from women who had heard about the breakfast, or who had watched a link sent by a cousin, or who had seen a screenshot in a Facebook group where a woman in Indiana had posted, "I don't know this lady, but she did something for me today." Evie made coffee and read each note and typed replies that did not offer legal advice and did not promise more than she could give and did not apologize for being tired. She wrote, "I'm proud of you." She wrote, "Start here." She wrote, "It's okay to be scared." She wrote, "It's okay to start small." She wrote, "Keep a folder." She wrote, "Guard your name." Around 9, she put on her boots and went to the studio. She turned the open sign toward the parking lot. The town yawned itself awake. Somewhere a paper landed on a porch with a soft slap. Somewhere a dog barked at a squirrel that had nothing but time. She arranged a row of coffee table books into a clean little sermon and wrapped a vase in brown paper like a girl who had learned she didn't need anyone else to tell her whether she deserved it. "Work is love made visible," a poet had written once. And that sounded like the kind of thing people embroider on pillows. But it was true, the same way of throwing a blanket just so across the arm of a couch is true. The blanket says sit, the room says stay. The life says you did this, and no one gets to take it from you. The whisper under the door had started this. Paper had finished it. The rest of it, every quiet day and small decision, would make the story less about the people who tried to write her out and more about the woman who kept a pen.